Hey everybody, Mary here. What is the main thing, the one big thing that Google learned in its quest to build the perfect team? That psychological safety is paramount. Because this has such profound implications related to conscious communication and mindfulness skills, I want to unpack this a bit. Psychological safety is not something that you typically luck into on a team. It's not even something that everybody knows like what it even means. It needs to be sort of worked through intentionally. And so I just want to take a moment and talk about this. And so we back up something like 10 years ago. Employee performance optimization was this hot topic, and organizations understood that employees, when they were encouraged to work together, they innovated faster, they found mistakes more quickly, and they were more effective. They got better results on projects. They had higher job satisfaction. So profits increase when teams collaborate more. So of course, organizations ask themselves, how do we optimize these collaborations? So Project Aristotle. This was a research, a meta-analysis that Google undertook that looked at a number of factors of its highest producing teams. They wanted to know, like, what are these folks doing? What is it around goal setting? Is it around planning? Is it around running meetings or leadership? And they looked at team culture, so like the highest performing teams. What was it like in these meetings? How did they relate to each other? And they did not find a lot of patterns around culture or some of those original factors, goal setting and planning and whatnot. So some teams did really well, and there was a ton of interruptions and people would cut each other off or, so on during different lively conversations. And other ones is be like, no, there was really like this turn-taking ethos. Some had really informal check-ins and birthday celebrations, kind of like cultivating friendship. And other high-performing teams, would just get right to business. So when they started trying to, settle through all the data, what became the one pattern that stood out was psychological safety. And so safe teams, what does this mean? Conversational turn-taking is one of the biggies. So everybody has a chance to be heard. So this may not be all at once. It may be that in some teams, people take turns on kind of every subject. It may be that it doesn't quite work out that way, but at the end of the day, as long as everyone got a chance to talk, the teams tend to do well. But if only one person or a small group of people speak all the time, the collective intelligence declines. So, is there room for every voice? So that's one. Two is, can the people kind of gauge the thoughts and feelings of others? There needs to be what they call average social sensitivity. Average to high, they actually said. And so this is a fancy way of saying that these teams were skilled at kind of intuiting how others felt based on their tone of voice, their facial expressions, their other nonverbals. Also, they were comfortable speaking up. They knew that mistakes weren't going to be just hammered on. And they knew that it was okay to disagree, that there was some welcoming of healthy conflict, that there wouldn't be rejection for not holding the party line. So all of these are aspects of safe teams. And one of the things that I found really interesting about the Google research, and I actually, when I'm training in Google, I'll ask teams, how many of you have heard of Project Aristotle? And often it's maybe one or two people, and the manager or the director or whoever's in the room will raise their hands. And the thing that's the most interesting is that part of the research indicated that the managers found this information intuitive. That it kind of like, oh yeah, like it's one of those things. Once you see a pattern, it sort of makes sense. But very, very, very few of them were doing anything explicit or intentional to cultivate psychological safety. It was kind of like, it was either there or it wasn't. They didn't know how to invoke it, how to invite it, how to create it. So NVC really comes handy when you start at that point of the conversation, because NVC is all about the how. NVC is really supporting people with all these things that we just mentioned around taking turns and everybody being heard, and like the actual micro skills that support all of that. But what I want to talk just a little bit more about is mistake making. This ties in with psychological safety. And I want to look at it from an NVC lens just a little bit deeper. So in kind of our dominant sort of default culture, there's a general ethos that mistakes deserve punishment. Some more than others. There are definitely worse mistakes and better mistakes to be made. But in NVC, we really challenge this idea of deserving on many levels. We look at mistakes as normal, first, as part of learning, which, of course, the research on growth mindset also favors. That's really emerging. But we also think of mistakes as something that can be held in the spirit of togetherness. Not so much, blame and finger pointing and so on, that's so destructive of trust. And so, so very much corrodes psychological safety. So in short, NVC practitioners are always at least trying to hold positive assumptions of intent about other people. And they do this through, paying attention to their needs. You were just trying to meet needs and that strategy didn't work. Or I definitely don't prefer that strategy. Say we're talking about a mistake that involves a judgment lapse, let's call it that, like lying on a resume. And even something like that, that's sort of like really against my sense of integrity. I still recognize that all behaviors are an attempt to meet needs. This is a fundamental pillar of NVC. Everything we do, everything we say, all behaviors are at least an attempt to meet a need. There are definitely some that are more effective and some that are less. But when we do this, we are able to start to step out of the blame and the criticism that is so stifling for teams if mistakes kind of come with that sense of like, I could get a lot of heat in my direction. It really shuts people down. So holding a sense of togetherness and the idea that all anyone's ever trying to do is meet a need helps keep teams out of that blame spiral and more in touch with the more important question, which is, what innovations or what new ideas, what wants to happen now? How can we work together? How can we keep somebody from disengaging from supporting the bigger team effort? So again, in organizational models that are older, that are oriented around competition, people will be really guarded around making mistakes. They'll hide them whenever they can. They will shirk accountability and responsibility at every chance because they're worried that something could come down on them. So in this way, NVC is really about supporting the psychological safety by giving us ways to manage mistakes differently. We can really transcend all of that without it being like some kind of spiritual bypass, like everything's always perfect. No, in NVC, there's room to be in what we call positive conflict while still holding that spirit of togetherness. These things are not considered mutually exclusive, right? So 3 key ideas, kind of just sum this up. Psychological safety and positive conflict are part of the same thing. 2, teams do not have to be best friends. They need equal speaking time and care around mistakes. 3, psychological safety also includes reading nonverbals, facial expressions, and knowing what to do with that information, knowing how to address it, what to say about it. These are all learnable skills. All of these are skill sets that if you don't have them naturally, some people kind of do it quite intuitively, but for many of us, these are things that need to be learned, and they are totally learnable. So, all right, that's all. So 2 things. 1, if you're still watching, share this with your manager or with any of your HR buddies or teammates. Get the conversation going at work, especially if your team is remote right now. These things are still really key, and there's all these other subtleties that come into play. And also, hey, while you're here, check out the conscious communication, the sort of the NVC-based Facebook group, how to apply all of these concepts at work that we talk about in NVC. It's what we go into in the group, and I'd love to see you there. So that's all for today. Thank you so much.